You get two for the price of one. This is Elizabeth Knapp. I'm Pushpa Gopalan. Pushpa. And we're from Burnett, as your agenda will tell you, and we'll get right into it. We have a quant study, little change of pace. We have a quant study to share with you, but it won't be all charts. We have pretty pictures, and we'll talk fast. It's really, oh, it does work. It's titled Navigating the Big Food Labyrinth, which is interesting that we bookended this session with Stacy's talk. It's pretty much, that's what it's about. We did a study to figure out what's going on in this, what is called big food space. So the impetus is, as Stacy held up that magazine, it's exactly that. The dynamics that are going on in the food industry, which is affecting a lot of our clients and everybody, and spawning an incredible pace and scale of change, which is why you all are here, and opportunity. And we wanted to understand what that actually was and what the human behavior was that is driving all of that change. But we figured we needed research with a greater depth of flavor. This deck is chock full of food puns. And we figured that we need to get in deeper. The research out there pretty much lumped everything together. All of big food was together. Everybody was leaving for the same reason. And so it was a very sort of generic, didn't go into the nuances of the dynamics, which we wanted to get into, especially because the implications and the insights we wanted coming out of it to be truly business model changing and not creating incremental communication, advertising-y changes that we're often stuck doing. We wanted to sort of change the way people went to market. So we talked to 4,600 adults in the US. This is a US study. Got into 105 food and eating occasions, 74 attributes, both rational and emotional. And this led to about 100,000 food substitutions. This is a giant little matrix that Elizabeth basically made sense for all of us. And we will get into some quick amuse-bouche type of overarching macro points, and then Elizabeth will get into some of the interesting segments that we saw emerge in the data. So pretty much the first thing we learned is big food is the boogeyman. It pretty much gets blamed for every change, every dynamic. Center aisle is dead, center aisle is living. It goes back and forth, but big food is pretty much blamed for everything, when the real story is actually much more nuanced than that. And we realized that it's not big food, it's just food. When you looked at the 100,000 substitutions that we had, people were leaving and going to things that were not labeled. They might be leaving a frozen breakfast, but they were going to bacon. So it was just a mishmash of number of substitutions that was much more nuanced. So we label it big food, but people call it just food. And it's not all in or all out. Yes, 57% of Americans are leaving big food in the sense that they are decreasing their usage of the food types and the occasions, but 43% are staying or actually stabilizing with that. And why is that? What's happening there? And that's what we wanted to decode. And not everyone that's leaving is leaving too healthy food alternatives, because not everyone's really leaving for health. Now, to be sure, everybody says they're eating better, but the actual choices and behaviors that sit behind the data don't actually reflect what they're saying or what they think they're doing. So in fact, people are leaving for three main reasons: health, quality, and convenience. And health and quality, as we go through the segments of people that are out there, you'll see have very squishy definitions and are completely in the eye of the beholder. So without much further ado, I'll hand it over to Elizabeth to go into some of the segments.
Yes. So given all of this complexity that Pushpa alluded to, we decided to use segmentation to try to understand, are there different groups of people with differing motivations for why they're changing their eating behaviors? And sure enough, if we look at who is at the big food table, there are 6 discrete segments of consumers. They are differentiated on their attitudes and behaviors around food health, food quality, and convenience. Now, 3 of them are moving away from big food, or those packaged foods kind of at the center of the supermarket that Stacy talked about earlier. but 3 of them are actually stable or even increasing in their consumption. So it's not as sweeping as we might have been led to believe by some of the gloom and doom articles and news. It's definitely a huge dynamic, though. So we'll start with our declining segments first. So these are people who are declining their use of packaged foods. But it's important to note that they're all still using packaged foods. They just might be limiting the number or types that they're regularly using. So just kind of contracting their repertoire. So our first group here are the wellness committed. And this is our biggest segment that we identified and represents 56 million American adults. So very, very sizable in this type of movement. They have the strongest health focus and are really believers in eating their way to wellness. They have the notion that my body is a temple, and they really just want to just nourish their bodies with the best possible food choices. They're already eating healthier than the average American, and their behaviors really match their beliefs. And they're seeking out more homemade and fresh options in lieu of packaged foods, and just constantly moving on to healthier alternatives as they become available in the marketplace or are kind of anointed as the new superfoods. So for example, in looking at all those food substitutions that Pushpa alluded to, this type of group, long ago left white rice for brown rice, but now they're transitioning even onward to things like ancient grains as healthier alternatives. So they're always aware of the new things coming to market and are very informed. But packaged foods can still play a role in their lives as long as they provide some nutrition and are minimally processed and offer natural ingredients. So there is still a market there. Our second decreasing segment are the foodie hedonists, and they represent 36 million adults. And their behaviors are shifting as a result of their search for better tasting and higher quality food products. So for them, food really equals pleasure. And they're switching to natural and fresh products because they're going to deliver a better eating experience. And nutrition is really more of a side benefit for them, so that comes along with it. But their diet still actually includes a lot of very sensory and indulgent types of foods that no one would imagine could be considered healthy. They'd be just as happy with like a gourmet hot dog or an artisanal ice cream with a really provocative flavor than the most healthy alternative of organic produce from their local farmer's market. So their drive for higher quality and more sensory foods has led them to make the types of substitutions where they're moving from hot dogs to bratwurst or from breakfast cereal to bacon and upgrading from fast food to fast casual types of restaurants. The third declining group we call the empty pantries, and this is a slightly smaller group representing 24 million, still big. And when I heard Stacy talking about Soylent, we had heard of that before, this is the group that really comes to mind. This is skewing to young, single working men, definitely a millennial male skew. These folks are just not interested in food. They're very routinized and habitualized in the way they shop, and they can't be bothered to stock their pantries or their fridge with things beyond basic condiments, some snacks, and the most basic of meal types of items. So think bread, peanut butter, frozen pizza, really minimalist. They're highly disengaged with food altogether and just don't appreciate the time that it takes to go shopping, to prepare meals, and even the time it takes to eat them. So, is there a pill for this, basically, is their attitude. So when we say they're moving away from big food, actually they're moving away from food altogether, almost full stop. They're just not buying many items at all. So one of the other things was that they too believe they're kind of eating better, but if you actually look at their behaviors, we found that they're the type of people who say, oh, I'm not eating fast food breakfast anymore, but I'm going to get bakery items at Starbucks. Or I'm not going to eat crackers anymore, I'm just going to have more potato chips. So their attitudes and their behaviors don't necessarily coincide. But what they're really, but what they're really looking for are strategies to reduce the amount of effort around food to zero. They want very simple, tasty, and highly convenient options that just don't take away from their day. So now we'll move to the 3 stable or increasing segments. Some of these groups actually share some of the same values and drivers as the others, but you know, for whatever reasons, they're actually still pretty happy using a lot of packaged foods, and so they haven't made quite as much of a transition out of the category. So the first group I'll talk about are the healthy enoughs, and this is another 30 million adults, and we see another demographic skew here, and this group is more likely to be women ages 45 to 65. They also have a very strong health focus, but they just don't have the same high nutritional standards that we saw with the wellness committed group that I talked about. Instead, they like to look for foods that have better for you cues, you know, stamped on them, you know, more fiber, less fat, you know, those types of things. And they're still pretty satisfied with the packaged and processed foods that are out there because it's really about trade-offs. They offer a lot of convenience and value and taste, as well as enough nutrition for them to feel content. They are following through on their health focus by showing declines in things like fast food and soft drinks and sweet snacks. But they're not as sophisticated about wellness eating, and so they're more likely to be making substitutions of other packaged foods for what they were currently eating. So, for example, some of their reported behaviors are moving from pre-sweetened cereals to plain cereals like a Cheerios or a Rice Krispies, or moving from regular yogurt to granola bars. You know, so still packaged foods. And ultimately for them, their desire for taste and convenience will kind of prevent them from considering some of the most healthy food options that are available. Our next stable segment are the prefab flavor seekers, and they are another 32 million of American adults. And they're like the foodie hedonists in that they really value the eating experience, but they are not gourmets. They are just regular people who love food and the experience of eating it. They really appreciate novelty and a variety of flavors, but they're kind of less adventurous, less sophisticated, and they're more constrained in their budgets, so they can't go out and get all those artisan products that the foodie hedonists are interested in. Taste is the single most important thing to them, and so things like natural ingredients or fresh ingredients get deprioritized. And packaged foods are really just fine from their perspective. They have a lot of nostalgia for the brands that they've eaten all their lives. They're trusted staples, they taste great, they're highly convenient, and they offer enough nutrition for their needs. So the changes that they tend to be making right now are really more about variety seeking and discovery of new products rather than any desire to kind of eat better foods. Our last segment is the smallest segment. We called them the good enough shortcuts, and they represent 22 million adults. Like the empty pantries, they are very convenience focused, and we see another skew to men, but more to Gen Xers and slightly older with children at home. So food is obviously important sustenance to them, but it's also a chore, and they just kind of have to wedge it into their days. And so this group is most likely to be eating fast food, eating meals on the go, or skipping meals altogether. Time and budget constraints have kind of led them to more of a quantity over quality mindset, and they're much more focused on taste and convenience. They know they don't have very healthy eating habits, but changing their strategies would just take too much time, effort, and probably cost more than their current strategies. So the good enoughs are actually the biggest users and fans of big foods right now, and they really rely on them as satisfying shortcuts to just putting food in bellies. They're more engaged, though, than the empty pantries, and food really is powerful and kind of brightening their day, but they really don't have the bandwidth right now to be thinking about higher quality or better nutrition and what they choose to eat. So Pushpa is going to lead to some lovely conclusions to what to take away from our segmentation.
I realize we're going to give you the gift. We're going to give you the gift of time, but we'll try not to. So we were just thinking of what this actually means for business. And granted, we had done this study, of course, with an eye towards our clients and just human behavior in general, because that's sort of our trade, understanding why people do what they do. But when we were really getting into it, it basically means that we do want to mimic the kind of food behaviors that we just heard just an inkling of from the first three speakers, is trying to make good food actually also be good business and make sure that there is enough opportunity for everyone understanding these behaviors. So when you take them pair by pair, because at the heart of it, there's the same motivation that drives them, The first is the tale of two foodies. Now you have two groups that say in our survey, I'm a foodie, and they check that box off, and they really do believe that. But they just come from different places. The foodie hedonists come from a place of knowledge and savvy and understanding food, and prefab flavor seekers want the quick version of that. So when you think of business and catering to their needs, there is potential to be had at both those ends of the spectrum. Foodie hedonists want storied foods, so dark matter is right up their alley. They want the story behind the food and understand where things come from, everything from ingredients, where it was sourced, freshness, understanding that it comes from a place of passion, as well as premium works for that end of the spectrum. And prefab flavor seekers is all about novelty, doing the cool thing, the popular thing, giving them ways to access some of the trends that are rising. That's sort of the potential at that end. The health, and this is something we especially are very passionate about, is doing right by that second group especially, is healthy is in the eye of beholder. Now they too check that mark that says I'm eating better, and it doesn't always reflect in the choices they're making. Now Wellness Committed knows everything there is about food. So anything that's a hyper version, I mean, rice cauliflower, if Stacey had been here, that's right up their alley. So getting the hyper version of nutrition and nutrient-dense foods, that's the way to play to that group, and making sure, again, the story here that they're interested in is whether the company or the brand is principled and transparent. So that's the way to win with that group. Healthy enough, you know, there are limitations of knowledge, of course, but more importantly, time and budget. And we really need to do right by that group, making sure that the cues on the popular foods that they are accessing actually represent product truths, and making sure that the shortcuts they use while shopping the store actually reflect what they should be eating. So again, they want to make sure that there's taste, clarity. We need to simplify and illuminate what they're eating for this group. Is there a pill for this? Yeah. This really is what motivates the convenience-driven groups. Now, both want quick, modular solutions, like if I can just pick it up in the store and eat it within the next 10 minutes, that's what they want. And turnkey and not interfere in terms of time. So while they both want the same thing, they come from different places. The empty pantries just have no love for food, so the key to their heart and wallets is really convenience. Good enough shortcuts. They want to love food. They take great pleasure from it. We just have to make a way, solutions so that they can access that. And that's it. Actually, my time is up. Yes.